Welcome, everybody, to the OPT Network. This week, we decided to put together a series of miracles. And what we know as believers is that God is still in the miracle-working business. But do we have an expectation when we are in need of God to petition Him for miracles? Or do we just believe that miracles happen for and to other people? Well, our guest this morning joins us to talk about the miracle-working power of God in her life and in her family. We welcome Lindsay Jeter to the OPT Network. Lindsay, good morning and welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
And so we're just so blessed to have this opportunity to share your miracle and your family's miracle. So take us back to that May 31st day when your son was going to take a trip with his father and his uncle.
My son went flying with his father and his father's twin brother. And it was a private plane here locally at Bulow Lake. And unfortunately, they did get into a crash and the twins both perished. But my son...
But before the crash, tell us, like, leading up to that day.
Okay.
Had your son, Mason, had he flown in the plane before?
He had. I didn't know. I wasn't aware of that. His father and I communicated, and told each other everything. But that was just one of the things that we hadn't had communicated about. So I didn't know, but he had flown before.
So for the backstory, you and your son's father had been divorced.
Right, for several years.
And so was this like his weekend?
It was. And I was going to get Mason early that day. And his father was always really good about getting back to me, but I couldn't get a hold of anyone. So I was at my school packing things up for the end of the school year, and I decided to just go on home and just wait until 6 o'clock, which is the time that I pick him up, and my daughter. But she didn't go with them, of course. But
so at this time, but you don't know that they're flying.
I did not know. I didn't know that my son was flying that day.
Oh, okay, so had Mason never said, "Hey, Dad takes me flying"?
No, ma'am. He had never told me.
So you have no inclination that there's a plane, that he's in it, and that there could be anything awry.
But I knew when I didn't get a hold of their father that something wasn't right. I just got that mother instinct feeling. And when I went home, I showed up to 2 cop cars at my house.
So what are you thinking?
I got out and I instantly asked the officer if my children were okay.
Just
I didn't
automatically.
say, who is it, what's going on? I just said, are my children okay? He said, ma'am, your son has been in a plane crash. And he's stable. I don't know if he's going to be okay, but he is. Because I said, is he going to be okay? He said, I don't know.
So, but when he says your son is in a plane crash and you have no idea about a plane crash, how then do you process, my son is in a plane crash?
I knew instantly, okay, well, he must have gone flying with the
so your
twins.
husband, okay, so they flew. It was, okay.
I never knew they took Mason, but again, it was his weekend. Most things we told each other about, but that just wasn't something that he said, hey, Lindsay, we're going flying today.
Right.
But
so you
anyway,
just assumed, okay, they took
assumed.
Mason.
And so anyway, he said, well, come follow me to the hospital or I'll take you. And I decided to ride with him. And I just, the Bible speaks about a peace that surpasses all understanding. And I've been saved for years, but I've never, ever experienced that peace. Not to that extent.
You had it in that moment?
I had it in that moment when I got in the car and I started praying. And I went into a travail, I'm telling you. I'm sure this cop thought, well, sisters is crazy, but no, he did. But I did. I went into a travail. And God gave me a peace. I felt His Spirit around me, and He gave me a peace. And I knew before I even laid eyes on my son that he was going to be okay. Now, I didn't know the ramifications of is there going to be any brain damage? Is he going to be able to walk? But I knew that he was going to be okay. And that's such a relative term.
Right.
But I knew that he was going to be okay.
You knew he was going to live.
I knew. Yeah.
And not die.
I knew. And when I got to the hospital and they took me to the back where he was, and he's hooked up to all this stuff, his face is bruised, he has dried blood all over his
Are you trying to
face.
figure out before you get there, like on the ride, you talk about this travail, and I'm thinking that's a deep, intense
It is.
crying out, wailing for your son.
Interceding and just pleading for his life, because the man, the policeman, but he was very honest. He said, I don't know if he's going to be up, because I kept asking. He said, ma'am, I don't know. I just know he's stable right now.
So do you go to the hospital, just the policeman and yourself?
Right, but my family's following me.
Okay,
They get word and they come to follow me. And
so before you get there and you get that peace that surpasses all understanding, are you thinking, what will he look like? How will I process this next step? Are you thinking about that at all?
no, not. I didn't think, oh, what's he going to look like or anything like that. I just knew I had to get to him.
Because I'm thinking plane crash. I'm wondering, okay, what?
Yeah. I wondered what his injuries were.
Right.
But a physical, what would he look like, didn't enter my mind. So when I did see him, it took my breath away. It was like, because he's hooked up to all this stuff, and he looks really rough, and you'll get to see the photo. I know it'll be shown.
Right.
And with his permission.
Sure. And because he's 7 years old now.
He is, yes.
And that's a tender little age. And so when you see him and you have that peace, what do you then do?
I walked up to him and put my hand on him, and I just started praying over him. I started praying again and trying to intercede to the Lord for him, and just praying over him. And right there in the doctor's office, I'm usually kind of shy about speaking in tongues, but that's a gift the Lord gave me.
Absolutely.
And I just let it go and just prayed out loud over him, and everybody was so respectful. There's probably 7, 8 people in the room, and they just gave me my time with him to pray over him and to lay hands on him. And I still had that peace, though. I can't explain it. And my mother later asked me, she said, Lindsay, your reaction with Mason, she said, I could tell you had been crying, but she said, you didn't have the reaction that we all did when he saw him. I said, I had my time with him before y'all got there. And I said, I can't explain it, Mom. So you're trying to get me to answer something that I really can't, because it's totally from God. It was just such a peace that I knew he was going to be okay.
And so what did the doctors tell you about Mason's prognosis?
Okay, so he had multiple facial fractures. He had a liver laceration. He had a minor skull fracture, thank God, but he did have a skull fracture. He had contusions in the brain, lung contusions, which really, my mother is a retired ICU nurse as of this summer, and had been in management in ICU for years, and she didn't tell me till later.
She understands logistically what he's facing.
She didn't tell me till later. She said that really scared me when they were talking about his lungs, and then of course with his brain, brain injuries are very scary. He had a lot of swelling around his head and in his brain. He had a femur that was broken, and he had a laceration on that same leg that was almost 7 inches long.
Wow.
He had a chemical burn, and we expected that was probably from the jet fuel or something. We don't really know for sure, but he had a very large chemical burn, and to this day it's a bad scar. We had that, and other cuts that had to be stitched up, a cut on his face, and other, he had multi-system organ trauma. And that's why it concerned us when he started running fever the next few days, and we had a hard time getting it down, because his body had been through so much trauma. And at one point, he was in kidney failure, and we were getting ready to transport him to New Orleans, and there was a storm about to come, and the doctor, the pediatric doctor there that deals with kidney issues, said, there's a storm coming, and I really don't feel safe with y'all traveling with him, and there is nothing that I can't tell you what to do from here,
Right.
even if I FaceTime you. And so what we did is we got on our prayer team again. You know, hey, this is our next issue.
Right.
We need y'all to step up to the plate with us again and pray. By that next
Do you
morning,
tell people, do you tell the prayer team what it is that you all are
Yes.
believing for and what you want them to be in
and
agreement?
claiming victory over it. Absolutely. They started praying for it, and that next morning, his numbers had drastically gotten better. I mean, just, and you know that was the hand of the Lord again.
Right.
I mean, because you would be pleased with a little bit of progress, but it was a drastic change the next morning
It was
with his kidneys.
miraculous change.
And he didn't have to go
he
at all.
didn't have to go. And so,
Not even after the storm passed. They didn't need him.
at what point do you have this peace, right? But at what point do you know that he is going to be healed and he is going to make a full recovery?
I mean, of course, as I saw his progress, and what did scare me a little bit, to be honest, you know, you have this peace, and the opposing force,
Of course.
Satan, wants to torment you with that. What I was concerned at that point was brain damage. And
How will he really be after he comes out of this?
because he was in a medically induced coma for 9 days.
Wow.
And that was, at that point, I knew his other organs were healing. The liver took care of itself. You know, the other things were being okay, but there still was some swelling in the brain, and that's what I was concerned about. But God just gave it to me again. He said, "I told you, he's going to be okay.
Wow.
He's going to be okay." And I just clung to that, and it made me strong for Mason. And he was in the hospital a total of 16 days, 10 in ICU. And I missed him, you know, I missed it because he was asleep most of the time, and I missed him. And when he woke up, of course, it took a while for him to talk and to open up and to
And for you to really know he was okay.
for me to really know that he was okay, right?
So when he does wake up, Lindsay, and you want to know that he's okay, and you know spiritually that he's okay, but then you're still left with your dad died and your uncle
Yes.
died and you were in this plane crash. How do you help him to understand that?
So that's another thing that I had to pray for and get prayer for. You know, people to stand in the gap for us. And I just felt the Lord tugging me, saying, "He's not ready. Wait till he asks you." And about 3 days after he was awake, he asked me.
What did he ask you?
He said, "Mom, I'm concerned about Uncle Ben." First, he asked about his uncle.
Was Uncle Ben flying the plane?
And he said, "I'm concerned about Uncle Ben." And I said, "Well," he said, is he okay?" And I said, "Son, I'm going to be honest with you. He didn't make it through the crash, buddy. He didn't." I said, "But he's in heaven, and he is going to look after you now, and he's okay now." You know, and he didn't feel anything. It was a fast going. You know, the Lord
Right.
took him fast, and he's okay now. And he said, "Well, what about my dad?" And I said, "Mason, he went with him." And I said, "But let me tell you something, buddy." I said, "This world," and I know that's hard. It's hard for me at 38 to wrap my mind around. I know a 7-year-old can't. But I said, "This world's not our permanent home. We're only here temporarily. So they're waiting on you. You'll see them again one day." But Daddy went to be with Uncle Ben. I said, "How beautiful is it that they came into this world together and they got to leave together?" And I said, "And they're going to be waiting on you, and now they're going to be guardian angels with you." Because the cool thing about this whole story, one of the neat things, as sad as some of the tragic parts to it are, is I grew up in church my whole life, but not in a faith where we talked a whole lot about angels. And the Lord revealed to me in my early 30s that not only are there angels, but we're assigned angels.
Right.
That are just waiting at our command to be dispatched for our glory to help us and to guard us, and different kinds. If there's different choirs of angels. And 2 nights after his crash, And by the way, he had on a bracelet that his daddy had taken him to a Blue Angel air show. And he had on the bracelet during the crash.
Wow.
The EMT saved it, took it off his arm, saved it. Then the nurse saved it from there and then gave it to me, and I wore it the whole time.
What were the chances that they would have saved this bracelet?
I know. And no blood was on it, no damage to it. And the Lord revealed to me in the middle of the night at 4:30, well, in the middle of the morning, 4:30 that morning, I remember looking at the clock. He said, Lindsay, from Psalm 91:11, you know, he talks about our guardian angels.
That's right.
He said, I honored your prayer. All this time you've been praying that I'll band angels around your kids. I honored that, and you need to tell people about that because people believe in angels, but do they really know that they're assigned angels? Do they really know? You didn't know till later. Do they know?
Right.
And the answer is, so many people probably still don't know, and I want them to know that they are assigned angels and that are just awaiting at their command to be dispatched for them in so many ways. We have ministering angels, we have guardian angels. And if you would have seen the two trees, which I was able to see the trees that he flew between, he was ejected from the plane. They were about 2 to 3 feet apart that he flew between when he was ejected.
Wow.
So that in itself, I mean, just the physics of this does not make sense to me.
Right.
That in itself let me know that angels carried him out. And his seatbelt broke from the back seat. You don't hear of that often. And my uncle's a pilot, so I hear about different things from him. He's like, you never hear about the seatbelt breaking like that. I mean, everything was strategically
ejected out of the plane.
Yeah. So he not only was he saved from being ejected, because he didn't have to feel that final pressure when they crashed nose down, he didn't have to see the scene. God protected his little eyes from seeing that tragedy. And so that's one of the things, one of the beauties in this whole thing. I mean, I've had people, when I shared his story, because I have to be his voice in this for him until he has he's at the age where he has the voice and can take this story on. But I've had people that have messaged me that heard about his story on Facebook and have said, I started praying for my guardian angels for me. Right. And I had 2 different stories of a wreck where the Lord had protected them. Wow. And it's, it's just knowing what it has meant to so many people, as sad as it was, though, at what he had to go through. Right. So God made good out of it. Right. What the devil meant for evil, God turned it for good. Now that he is healing and he's getting better, how do you help him to understand why he didn't die? He asked me that, and his sister asked too. She said, Mimi, to my mother, she calls her Mimi, Mimi, if the angels saved Mason, why didn't they save my dad? There is no answer for that, but we explained to her and to him that he has an appointed time for us. It just wasn't his turn, and that he has a responsibility now to share this with people and to share what Jesus can do for us and to share about miracles with others. And you're right, God is still in the miracle working business. We think, we think nothing bad's ever going to happen to us. But like you said, we also think that miracle probably never happened to me. Right. But it can. And the reason why we wanted to share your family's story, Lindsay and Mason's story, is because in the spirit realm, we just knew that there was an expectation and that you had made a demand on heaven. And you had an expectation. And that there's so many people, and you are right, we are all here for only an appointed time. Absolutely. And when that time comes, God is going to call us home. If we're believers, we're going to go home to glory. But that there are people during this, probably the hardest time in our history on the planet. We're seeing so many people dealing with death
and loss
Right.
and sickness.
Especially right now.
Right. During this pandemic, something that we never thought that we'd see in our lifetime.
Right.
And we just want people to know that God is still in the miracle working business, and we can still petition God for those miracles.
He's wanting us to wake up. It's time, myself included, for us all to wake up and put on that armor to be ready in this battle. Because as the Bible says, the devil's out to kill, steal, and destroy, and he'll do everything he can to do that. And none of us know when he's coming back, but I do believe that we're seeing a lot of the birth pains, and I do believe that we have to stay strong and keep a strong faith that he is still here with us. He's already conquered this battle. He's already won it on the cross. It's already been won. And we have to do our part, though, and help to witness for him and help others and in any way we can. And as you said, to still expect those miracles.
Absolutely.
Because they're all around us.
They are. And sometimes they're really big miracles, like in Mason, in your family's case. And sometimes we take for granted those miracles that happen that are just those seemingly God winks, but are really miracles in their own right. And so you're probably about 6 or so months out.
We are, and he's doing a lot better physically. He's walking. He had physical therapy, and he's walking. He's in counseling, him and my daughter. And but we
How is that process for them and for you?
It's been helpful. It's been helpful for them. And I make sure that we talk about it. We talk about it. We're open about it, and to keep their dad's memory alive. Just to make sure that we're very open about it, and to let them know. Sometimes they'll say, "I miss him. I wish he were here." And I said, "He is. You can't see him, but he is here with you.
Right here.
Yeah,
in your heart.
He's here." So I'm still in awe of what the Lord has done for and through Mason. And yesterday, just preluding up to today, he was tested for gifted. If his second round, he made it through the first round, and I thought, oh my gosh, not only was my son saved, not only was he okay, but there's, other than some scars internally, there's not one thing wrong with that baby. And his mind's okay, and more than okay. He's being tested for gifted. I mean, it's still hard to wrap my mind around it, and I'm just in such awe of what the Lord has done for him.
Do you now start to really seek God for knowing that God saved him?
Oh, absolutely.
God saved him.
Exponentially grew my faith, and others all around us.
And
Yeah.
is he able at 7 years old to understand the power of what God did for him?
I don't think to the fullest capability that he will one day. I don't think it's fully sunk in. Not yet.
And he's still a baby, really. He's still young. Does he have any memory of those moments leading up to that horrible crash?
He does. He remembers before and after. He remembers before when the plane started having issues that his uncle was becoming real worried, as anybody would. And his daddy turned around and held his hand and said, "It's going to be okay, son." He said, "Daddy told me that a few times. It's going to be okay, son." And his daddy was right in a way. It ended up for him being okay, but to know that his dad was still comforting him, because he knew he couldn't freak out. He had to comfort his son. Just melted my heart. And he remembers afterwards, he said, "I remember my daddy holding my hand, and then I just went to sleep," which means that's probably at the point that he was knocked out because he was thrown out of the plane. And the EMTs, when someone departs from the airport, they have to registered and tell every person that's in there. But the EMTs initially didn't know how many people were in that plane. They wouldn't have known there was a third passenger if they wouldn't have heard him crying in the woods. The forestry department had to clear out everything to get to him. He was crying.
So
crying
many miracles.
out.
So
many in this
so
one
many
story.
miracles.
So many.
Wow.
But they found him, and he said he remembers waking up and calling out for his daddy. He said, but he didn't come. I said he couldn't get there, son. I said, but he's watching out for you now.
Wow. And so your faith, I know, is just at a place where you understand intrinsically that there's nothing that is too big for God.
No, that's right, absolutely. And I don't fear. I've never really been a fearful person of much, but I don't have the fears I used to. You think it'd be the opposite, but it's not. I know that God's with us.
Wow. Lindsay, thank you.
Thank you.
For sharing yours and Mason's and your family story. And may God continue to release his ministering and protecting angels around your family and your children and all of our children. And we just know that God has an incredible plan for Mason's little life, and we just can't wait to see what happens next.
Thank y'all.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed. So many miracles inside miracles. Our guest this morning, Lindsay Jeter. Stay on point, everybody. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This is my final point, on point today. I keep saying it over and over and over. We wanted to really highlight miracles of people that many of us know. Because sometimes you just think miracles happen in a distant place, or miracles just happened in the Bible, unless you or your family member or somebody that you know has experienced or lived through a miracle with somebody else. And so these are absolutely modern day miracles. So I had started reading a book, and it was entitled Miracles Happen. Joan Hunter is the author of the book. And so we started talking, she and I, about miracles. And I know that for many people who are not Bible scholars like myself, sometimes we'll get a little bit concerned about why miracles don't always happen when you say that you are praying and believing God for a miracle. And so she and I had that discussion. And she said, really, we have to participate with God in our own miracle. Like sometimes you could be believing God that a person is going to be healed of cancer, or they're going to be healed of whatever infirmity that they are going through. But if that person doesn't truly believe that they will be healed, and they're just saying, yeah, I believe that God can heal, but they don't believe it in their heart. You know, the scripture says that there is power when two or more come together touching and agreeing. There is power in agreement, and agreement has to really happen. And so oftentimes I just, from common sense, am thinking a lot of times we don't see miracles because maybe one or more person is saying that they want a miracle, but they don't truly believe that a miracle can happen for them or that it will happen. So in my family and my personal life, we've had several people in our family that have gotten cancer and have died. And all the while on the journey, we said, you know, we're believing God for a miracle. And the miracle happened on the other side. We believe that healing happened in heaven. They were saved, and we believe that when they died that they were going to go to heaven. And so my cousin had gotten cancer about 2 years ago. And again, we said, we're believing God for a miracle. Well, about 1.5 years later, he was able to ring the bell, and he was cancer-free. And we celebrated because finally we had seen the manifestation of God's miraculous working power on this side. But then when you look at stories like Lindsay's, the miracle was twofold, really. Her son was saved, but the two brothers were killed. We could say that their miracle happened on the other side, but then there would be maybe his parents that would say, why weren't they saved? Or why wasn't at least one of them saved? And those are just, I believe, the mysteries of God that we may not ever know. And so when I was talking to Joan Hunter about miracles happening, she just recounted so many miracles that she had seen in her ministry and in her life. And she said they come in all forms. She talked about the miracle of redemption, the miracle of healing, the miracle of provision, the miracle of salvation, the miracle of conception. And so she just wrote, extensively about every miracle that you couldn't even think about. And here's what I think we all really need to open our eyes about miracles on, is that a miracle happens every day that we wake up. A miracle happens every day a baby is born. A miracle happens every time we place our hands on our heart or our chest and we feel our heartbeat. So miracles are happening that we're not even acknowledging. But in this time of sometimes people feeling helpless and hopeless in this pandemic, we really wanted to highlight people that can attest to God's miraculous working power. And when you hear all of the ladies that talked about really experiencing God in a real personal way, what you hear them all really talk about, that common thread, is that peace that surpasses all understanding. And I believe that even in the pandemic, and even with the deaths mounting, even with people dying, and us not being able to gather in the way that we once did, I believe there are still miracles that can happen. But we have to have our expector turned way up. And even when we don't see the miracle, like my family, for years and years and years, even young people in our family that died, and it seems so incredibly unfair. And we were disappointed and sad, but we still celebrated their lives. We never lost hope in miracles. Miracles are still happening. One miracle that we heard about and read about and even talked to the family about was one man had remained on a ventilator for 30 days. They thought he would not survive the virus, but he did. And so miracles are happening. They're happening all around us if we'll just stop and take notice. And that's our final point, on point today. Stay with us. We're back to wrap up right after this.